The train whistle screamed across the Wyoming plains as Elena Everhart pressed her trembling fingers against the glass, watching the endless prairie roll past her window, knowing her life was about to change forever, but having no idea just how dramatically those changes would shake the very foundation of who she believed herself to be. She was 23 years old, traveling alone and going blind. The truth of it sat heavy in her chest like a stone. The doctors in Boston had been clear. Her vision would deteriorate progressively over the next several months until complete darkness claimed her. Already, the edges of her sight had grown fuzzy, and the world seemed perpetually shrouded in a thin veil. Colors bled into one another, and reading had become nearly impossible without bringing the page so close to her face that her nose practically touched the paper. That was why she had answered the advertisement. What other choice did she have? Her parents were dead, her small inheritance exhausted on medical consultations that offered no hope, and her employment at the textile factory had ended the moment. Her supervisor noticed her squinting at her work, her needle missing the fabric more often than finding it. The advertisement had been simple: rancher seeking wife, must be strong of spirit and willing to work. Wyoming territory, correspondence welcomed. She had written honestly about her condition. She had expected no response or perhaps a polite rejection. Instead, she received a letter from Bennett Blake that had made her hands shake as she read it. "Miss Everhart," it began, "I appreciate your honesty about your condition. I believe there are many ways to see a person, and the eyes are just one of them. If you are willing to take a chance on a rough rancher with more cattle than manners, I am willing to take a chance on a woman with courage enough to tell the truth. Come to Kelton, Wyoming. I will meet you at the train station on the 15th of June. That was tomorrow. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the conductor called out that they would be arriving in Kelton within the hour. She had no idea what Bennett Blake looked like beyond his brief physical description. Tall, dark-haired, 30 years old. She had sent him a photograph taken 2 years prior, when her eyes had still been clear and bright. Would he be disappointed when he saw her now, squinting and hesitant? The train began to slow, its great iron wheels grinding against the tracks. Elena gathered her belongings, one small trunk containing all her worldly possessions, and a worn leather satchel that held her mother's Bible and the letters from Bennett. There had been only 3 letters in total. Bennett Blake was evidently not a man who wasted words. The platform came into view through her increasingly blurred vision. She could make out shapes and movement, but individual faces were becoming harder to distinguish. Her chest tightened with anxiety. How would she know which man was Bennett? What if she walked right past him? The train shuddered to a complete stop. Elena stood on uncertain legs, her heart racing. Other passengers pushed past her, eager to disembark, and she waited until the rush had cleared before carefully making her way to the exit. The conductor offered his hand to help her down the steep steps, and then she was standing on Wyoming soil for the first time in her life. The air smelled different here. Cleaner somehow, tinged with sage and dust, and something wild she could not name. The sun was bright overhead, making her squint even more, and she raised one hand to shade her eyes as she scanned the platform. There were several figures moving about. She could not make out their features clearly. Panic began to rise in her throat. What should she do? Call out his name? Wait. "Miss Everhart," the voice came from her left, deep and rough around the edges but not unkind. She turned toward it, making out the shape of a very tall man standing a few feet away. He wore what appeared to be a dark hat, and she could see the general outline of broad shoulders. "Yes," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am Elena Everhart. Are you Mr. Blake?" "I am." He paused, and she sensed him studying her, "Welcome to Kelton. Did you have a good journey?" "Long," she admitted, "but not unpleasant." Another pause. She wished desperately that she could see his face clearly, read his expression. Was he disappointed? "Regretting his decision already?" "Your trunk," he said. "Is that it there, the brown one?" She glanced at where he seemed to be indicating, seeing a dark shape that was probably her trunk. "Yes, that should be it. I will get it loaded. The wagon is just over there." He moved past her, and she caught the scent of leather and horses and open air. Her fingers twisted together nervously as she waited, feeling exposed and vulnerable standing alone on the platform. He returned quickly, his footsteps heavy on the wooden boards. "Ready?" "Yes." He did not offer his arm, which surprised her. Instead, he simply started walking, and she followed the sound of his boots, stepping carefully to avoid tripping. After a few steps, his voice came again, closer than she expected. "The wagon is about 30 feet ahead. There are no obstacles in your path." Something in her chest loosened slightly. He was paying attention. He had noticed her difficulty. She walked forward and nearly ran into the side of the wagon before she saw it clearly. Her hands fumbled for purchase, and then his hands were there, large and surprisingly gentle, guiding hers to the side of the wagon seat. "Step is right there," he said quietly. "About a foot up." She found it with her boot and hauled herself up, grateful when she finally settled onto the wooden seat. He moved around to the other side with easy grace and settled beside her, the wagon rocking slightly under his weight. She could feel the warmth of him, though he maintained a respectful distance between them. The reins snapped, and the horses started forward. The town of Kelton moved past them in a blur of shapes and colors Elena could not quite focus on. She felt his gaze on her more than once but kept her face forward, unsure what to say. Finally, he spoke. "Your letters said your vision is getting worse." There was no point in denying it. "Yes, the doctors say I will be completely blind within the year, perhaps sooner." She swallowed hard. "If you have changed your mind, I understand. You can take me back to the station. There is an eastbound train tomorrow morning." The wagon continued rolling forward. Several long moments passed before he answered. "I have not changed my mind." "Why not?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "You could have any woman. Why would you choose one who will be a burden?" "You think being blind makes you a burden. Does it not? Seems to me you made it all the way from Boston to Wyoming by yourself," he said. "That does not sound like something a burden would do." Unexpected tears pricked her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. "You are kind to say so." "I am not kind." His voice was firm, matter of fact. "I am practical. I need a wife who understands hard work and is not afraid of difficulties." "You have already proven you are both those things." The wagon turned, leaving what she assumed was the main road. The terrain grew rougher and she gripped the edge of the seat to keep from bouncing too hard. "How far is your ranch?" she asked. "About 5 miles from town." "We will be there in under an hour." "Do you live alone?" "I have 3 ranch hands who bunk in the barn. 2 of them are brothers, Miguel and Carlos. They have worked for me for 4 years. Good men. The third is an older fellow named Rusty who has been working cattle since before I was born. They are trustworthy, but if any of them make you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately." She nodded, absorbing this information. "What will my responsibilities be?" "Cooking, mostly, if you are willing. The men have been taking turns, but none of us are particularly skilled at it." "Cleaning the house. Tending the kitchen garden if you want, though that is not required. Beyond that, whatever you feel capable of doing. And you?" She turned toward where she thought his face would be. "What are your responsibilities?" "Cattle, mostly. I run about 500 head. Between me and the men, we manage the grazing, the branding, taking them to market twice a year. It is dawn to dusk work, sometimes longer. So I will not see much of you." She felt rather than saw him glance at her. That troubles you. I just want to understand what to expect. I come in for breakfast before dawn, dinner at noon if I can manage it, supper after dark. Sundays I try not to work unless something urgent comes up. He paused. I know this is not a conventional marriage. I do not expect anything from you that you are not willing to give. You will have your own room. I will not pressure you. Heat flooded her cheeks. She had not even thought that far ahead, too consumed with worry about her failing eyes and the enormous change she was undertaking. Of course, marriage implied certain intimacies, but he was offering her space and time. Thank you, she said quietly. That is considerate. It is decent, he corrected. There is a difference. The wagon rolled on, and Elena tried to take in her surroundings despite her poor vision. The landscape seemed vast and open, so different from the cramped streets of Boston. The air moved differently here, carrying scents of grass and earth and endless sky. Can you see anything clearly? He asked suddenly. Some. Shapes and general colors. Details are difficult unless something is very close. The ranch house is coming into view now. It is about a quarter-mile ahead. Wood construction, 2 stories, painted white. There is a porch that wraps around the front and eastern side. The barn is off to the left, painted red. Corrals behind it. The bunkhouse is that smaller structure beyond the barn. His descriptions painted a clearer picture than her eyes could manage. She felt a rush of gratitude. Thank you. I will always tell you what I see, he said simply. That way your eyes can rest and you can use mine. Something in her chest cracked open at those words. Your eyes can rest, and you can use mine. She had been so afraid of being a burden, of being pitied or resented. But Bennett Blake spoke as if it were the most natural thing in the world to share his sight with her. The wagon drew to a stop, and she heard him set the brake. Wait there, he said, and she heard him jump down. A moment later, his hands were there again, steadying her as she climbed down. This time, she let herself lean on his strength, trusting him to guide her safely to the ground. Her boots touched dirt, and she stood for a moment, letting the reality of it all wash over her. She was in Wyoming. She was about to enter a house that would be her home. She was married in name only to a man she could barely see. The steps are right in front of you, Bennett said. 5 of them. I have got your trunk. Go on ahead. She climbed the steps carefully, trailing one hand along what felt like a wooden railing. The porch boards creaked under her feet, solid and real. She heard Bennett behind her, carrying her trunk with apparent ease. A door opened, and she stepped through into what she assumed was the house. The air inside was cooler, shaded from the relentless sun. She stood uncertainly in what seemed to be an entryway, not wanting to move without knowing where she was going. Straight ahead is the main room, Bennett said, his voice coming from behind her. Kitchen is to your left. Stairs to the 2nd floor are to your right. I am going to take your trunk upstairs. Your room is the first door at the top. I will show you properly in a moment. She heard him climb the stairs, the old wood creaking under his weight. Left alone, she took a tentative step forward, her hands outstretched. Her fingers found the back of what felt like a chair. She moved around it carefully, trying to get a sense of the space. The house smelled of wood smoke and coffee, and a faint mustiness that suggested a place lived in by men who did not prioritize cleaning. But it did not smell dirty, just lived in and practical. Bennett's boots sounded on the stairs again. Want to see your room? She turned toward his voice. Yes, please. His hand found her elbow and he guided her to the stairs. 12 steps, he said. Railing on your right. She climbed slowly, counting each step, grateful for his steady presence behind her. At the top, he guided her left, then stopped. This is your room, he said, and she heard a door open. Window faces east, so you will get morning sun. Bed is against the far wall, wardrobe to the right. Washstand with basin and pitcher to the left. Your trunk is at the foot of the bed." She stepped inside and he followed. She wished so desperately she could see it clearly. "What colors?" she asked. "The walls are a pale yellow. Curtains are white with some kind of flower pattern. Bedspread is blue. Nothing fancy, but it is clean." "It sounds lovely. My room is across the hall." Washroom is the door at the end of the hallway. There is an outhouse behind the kitchen for daytime use. He paused. "I know this is a lot to take in. Do you need time to rest, or would you like to see the rest of the house?" "I would like to see the rest," she said. "I want to start learning where everything is." "All right." He spent the next hour guiding her through the house, describing each room in detail and letting her feel her way around the furniture. The kitchen was large and well equipped, with a massive cast iron stove that Bennett warned her could get dangerously hot. The main room contained several chairs, a sofa that had seen better days, and a dining table that could seat 8. There was a small office off the main room where Bennett kept his ranch records. By the time they finished the tour, Elena's head was spinning with information, but she felt less panicked. She could navigate this space. It would take time, but she could learn it. "You must be hungry," Bennett said. "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and bacon." "I can cook," she said quickly. "If you will tell me where things are." "You sure? You have had a long day, I am sure. I would like to feel useful." He showed her where the food was kept, the dishes, the utensils. As she worked, he stayed nearby, offering information when she needed it but not hovering. It was a delicate balance, and she appreciated his instinct for it. The meal was simple: beans, bacon, cornbread, and coffee. They ate at the kitchen table, sitting across from each other. Elena was hyper-aware of his presence, the sound of his breathing, the way he moved his fork against his plate. "This is good," he said after a few bites. "Much better than what I usually manage. It is only beans and bacon. But the beans are not burned and the bacon is not raw. That is an improvement." She smiled despite herself. "Your standards are very low. Living alone does that to a man." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Elena gathered her courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her since she arrived. "Why did you really agree to marry me, Mr. Blake? Surely there were other women who answered your advertisement, women without complications." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My mother went blind when I was 12 years old." Elena's hand stilled on her fork. "It was gradual, like yours," he continued. "Took about 2 years before she lost her sight completely. I watched my father grow impatient with her, watched him start treating her like she was made of glass, like she could not do anything for herself anymore. It made her feel useless and small. I swore then that if I ever met someone in a similar situation, I would treat them like a whole person, not a fragile thing to be pitied. What happened to your mother? She died 6 years ago, pneumonia. My father passed 2 years before that, a bad fall from a horse." His voice remained steady, factual, but she could hear the grief beneath it. "When I read your letter and you were honest about your condition, I respected that. I thought we could help each other. I need a wife and you need security. Seemed like a fair trade. Just a practical arrangement then." "Practical is not the same as cold," he said. "I am not expecting us to pretend feelings that are not there, but I am hoping we can build something real over time. Respect, at least, maybe friendship. And if more than friendship develops, then we will deal with that when it happens." She could hear something in his voice that might have been a smile. "I am not opposed to the idea." Her cheeks warmed again. She focused on her plate, grateful he could not see her blush clearly in the dimming light. After dinner, Bennett showed her how to work the pump at the sink and helped her wash the dishes. His hands brushed hers more than once as they worked, and she found herself aware of every accidental touch. "You should get some rest," he said when they finished. Tomorrow, I will introduce you to the men and show you more of the ranch if you are up for it. I would like that. He walked her to the stairs, his hand light on her elbow. Sleep well, Miss Everhart. Elena, she said. Please call me Elena. Elena, he repeated, and her name sounded different in his rough voice. And you should call me Bennett. Bennett, she said softly. She felt his gaze on her in the darkness. Then he stepped back. Good night, Elena. Good night. She climbed the stairs alone, counting the steps, and found her room by touch. Inside, she lit the lamp Bennett had shown her earlier, though it did little good for her failing eyes. She unpacked her trunk slowly, hanging her few dresses in the wardrobe and placing her undergarments in the dresser drawers. When she finally lay down on the bed, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. But despite her tiredness, sleep did not come easily. Her mind churned with everything that had happened, every word Bennett had spoken, every gentle touch of his hand guiding her. He had not treated her like she was broken. He had not spoken to her with pity or false cheerfulness. He had simply treated her like a person who needed accurate information to navigate her world. It was more than she had dared hope for. Outside, she could hear the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind across the prairie. This was her life now. This vast, open place with its clean air and endless sky she could barely see. And Bennett Blake, the rancher who had looked at her failing eyes and decided to offer his own. Sleep finally claimed her, and she dreamed of wide horizons and a voice in the darkness telling her what he saw. The next morning, Elena woke to the sound of roosters crowing and unfamiliar voices outside her window. She lay still for a moment, disoriented, before memory flooded back. Wyoming. The ranch. Bennett. She rose and dressed carefully in one of her simple work dresses, then made her way downstairs, using the railing and counting steps as Bennett had taught her. The kitchen was empty, but she could smell coffee and see the vague shape of the pot sitting on the stove, still warm. She was trying to figure out the breakfast situation when the front door opened. "Good morning," Bennett's voice said. "I was just coming to wake you. The men are eager to meet you." "I am sorry I overslept. What time is it?" "Just past 6. That is not oversleeping." "I should have been clearer last night. I usually eat at 5, but you do not have to keep rancher hours if you do not want to." "I want to pull my weight," she said firmly. "Tomorrow I will be up at 5, if you are sure." He moved into the kitchen and she heard him pour coffee. "Want some?" "Please." He pressed a warm mug into her hands. "The men are outside. Ready," she nodded, and he led her out onto the porch. The morning air was cool and fresh, and she could hear the sounds of the ranch coming to life around her. Horses nickering, men talking in low voices, the creak of barn doors. "Boys," Bennett called out, and the conversation stopped. "Come meet my wife." She heard boots on dirt drawing closer. 3 figures materialized in her blurred vision. "Elena, this is Miguel, Carlos, and Rusty." Bennett pointed to each man as he said their names, though Elena could not distinguish between them. "Men, this is Elena. She will be cooking for us, so I expect you to be on your best behavior." "Madam," said a voice that sounded young and polite, "we are very happy to meet you." "That is Miguel," Bennett said quietly, just for her. "Carlos is to his left, Rusty is the one on the right." "I am very pleased to meet you all," Elena said, trying to project confidence she did not entirely feel. "I hope my cooking meets your expectations." "Anything that is not burnt will be a blessing, madam," said a gravelly voice that must have been Rusty. "Bennett here could burn water if you gave him half a chance." The men laughed, and Bennett made a sound that might have been grudging agreement. The tension in Elena's shoulders eased slightly. They seemed kind. "Elena's vision is impaired," Bennett said, his tone matter of fact. "If you see her struggling with something, offer to help, but do not treat her like she is helpless." "Understood," A chorus of agreement answered him. Elena felt a rush of gratitude for Bennett's directness. He was not trying to hide her condition or pretend it did not exist. He was simply stating facts and setting expectations. "All right, back to work," Bennett said. "I will see you boys at noon." The men dispersed, and Bennett turned back to Elena. "That went well. They seem nice." "They are. Rusty has a mouth on him sometimes, but his heart is good. The brothers are probably the most polite men I have ever met." He paused. "Want to walk around a bit? Get a sense of the layout?" "Yes, please." He offered his arm this time, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of his muscles under her fingers. They walked slowly, and he described everything they passed. The barn with its hayloft and horse stalls, the corrals where young horses were being trained, the chicken coop, the small vegetable garden that had been neglected. "My mother used to keep a garden," he said as they stood beside the weedy plot. "But after she died, I let it go. If you want to tend it, I can help you clear it out." "I would like that," she said. "I might not be able to see well enough to pull weeds, but I could help plant and water." "We will figure it out together." That phrase kept recurring. Together we will figure it out. It was such a simple concept, but it meant everything to Elena. She was not alone in this. She had a partner, however unconventional their arrangement. They were walking back toward the house when they heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Bennett tensed beside her. "Stay here," he said, guiding her to stand by the porch steps. She heard him move away, and a moment later a horse skidded to a stop nearby. "Bennett." The voice was male, young, and breathless. "We have got trouble. A group of rustlers hit the Peterson place last night, took about 50 head. Sheriff sent me around to warn everyone." "How many rustlers?" Bennett's voice had gone hard and focused. "Peterson said at least 5, maybe more. They are likely still in the area." Elena's heart began to pound. Rustlers meant danger, meant violence. She had heard stories of what happened to people who got in the way of cattle thieves. "All right," Bennett said. "Thank you for the warning, Tommy. Ride safe." The horse galloped away. Bennett returned to her side, and she could feel the tension radiating off him. "I need to secure the herd," he said. "Move them closer to the house where we can watch them better. I want you to stay inside today. Lock the doors." "Bennett, what if they come here?" "They will not. Rustlers go after isolated herds, not ranches where men are working. But I need to know you are safe inside while I handle this." She nodded, though fear had settled cold in her stomach. He walked her into the house, and she heard him moving around, checking windows. "There is a rifle above the fireplace," he said. "Do you know how to shoot?" "My father taught me when I was young. But Bennett, I can barely see." "Then do not shoot unless someone tries to break in and you can tell they are right in front of you. Keep the doors locked." "I will be back as soon as I can." He left before she could say anything else, and she heard him shouting orders to the men outside. The house felt suddenly very large and very empty around her. Elena spent the morning trying to keep busy. She made bread, scrubbed the kitchen floor, cleaned dishes that did not need cleaning. But her ears were tuned to every sound outside, and her heart jumped at each unexpected noise. By noon, Bennett had not returned. She made dinner anyway, keeping it warm on the stove in case the men came in hungry. But the house remained empty, and anxiety gnawed at her. What if the rustlers did come? What if there was a gunfight? What if Bennett was hurt? She barely knew him, but the thought of something happening to him made her chest ache. He had been kind to her, more than kind. He had looked at her blindness and seen a person, not a problem. She could not bear the thought of losing that before she even had a chance to know him properly. The afternoon crawled by. Elena sat in the kitchen, straining to hear any indication of what was happening outside. She heard horses occasionally, men shouting to each other, but nothing that sounded like trouble. Finally, As the sun was beginning to set based on the cooling air, the front door opened. "Elena," Bennett's voice, tired but steady. "I am in the kitchen." His footsteps approached. "Sorry I did not make it back sooner. It took most of the day to move the herd and set up watches." "Are you all right? Are the men all right?" "We are fine. Tired but fine. No sign of rustlers on our land." He paused. "You have been worried." It was not a question. She nodded anyway. "I know that must seem silly. We barely know each other." "It is not silly." His voice was closer now. "I was worried about leaving you alone all day too." Something warm unfurled in her chest. "There is dinner," she said. "If you are hungry, starving, let me wash up first. I smell like cattle and sweat." She heard him move toward the sink, heard the pump working and water splashing. A few minutes later, they were sitting at the kitchen table together, and Elena was serving him the beef stew she had managed to make despite her limited vision. "This is excellent," he said after the first bite. "How did you manage this?" "Cooking is mostly about feeling and timing." "I can still do that, even if I cannot see well." They ate in companionable silence. When they finished, Bennett helped her with the dishes again. "The men will be taking shifts watching the herd tonight," he said as they worked. "I am on the midnight to dawn watch. You must be exhausted." "I will catch a few hours of sleep before then. But Elena, I want you to know something. If there is ever any real danger, my priority is keeping you safe. The cattle, the ranch, none of it matters as much as that." She turned toward him, her hand still in the dishwater. "Why?" "Because you are my wife. Because you trusted me enough to come all this way. Because keeping you safe is the most important job I have." His voice was quiet but firm, leaving no room for doubt. "Bennett." She did not know what else to say. The intensity of his commitment staggered her. "Go on to bed," he said gently. "I will finish here." "But Elena, you have done more than enough today. Let me finish." She dried her hands and left him to it, climbing the stairs slowly in the gathering darkness. In her room, she changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, her heart full of conflicting emotions. She had come to Wyoming expecting to be a burden, expecting tolerance at best. Instead, she had found a man who treated her like she mattered, who worried about her safety, who said protecting her was his most important job. It would be very easy to fall in love with Bennett Blake. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it felt like hope. The next several weeks fell into a rhythm. Elena woke before dawn to make breakfast for Bennett and the men. She cooked 3 meals a day, cleaned the house, and began learning her way around the ranch with increasing confidence. Bennett, or one of the men, was always willing to walk with her and describe the surroundings, and gradually the layout of the property became clear in her mind. The threat of rustlers faded after the sheriff caught the gang trying to cross into Colorado with stolen cattle. 3 were arrested, 2 escaped, but none returned to trouble the ranches around Kelton. Elena began to tend the garden in earnest. Bennett had spent a Sunday helping her clear the weeds and till the soil, and she had planted vegetables she could identify by feel: tomatoes, beans, squash, carrots. Miguel had built her raised beds that were easier to reach, and she spent an hour each morning tending her growing plants. Her vision continued to deteriorate. By the end of the first month, she could no longer distinguish faces at all, only vague shapes and colors. But she learned to navigate by memory and feel, and the work of running a household kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. What surprised her most was how her relationship with Bennett was developing. They spent their evenings together after supper, sitting on the porch or in the main room. He would read to her from the newspaper, or from books he borrowed from the small lending library in town. His voice became intimately familiar to her, the slight roughness of it, the way he stumbled over big words sometimes, the warmth that crept in when he was amused. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his parents, about learning the cattle business from the ground up. She told him about Boston, about her childhood, about the terror of realizing her sight was failing and not knowing what would become of her. "You are one of the bravest people I have ever met," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. At least, she assumed he was watching. She could only see vague orange and pink smears across her vision. "I am not brave. I was terrified." "Being terrified and doing it anyway is the definition of brave," she smiled. "By that logic, you must be brave too, taking in a woman you had never met, knowing she would be blind." "I told you that was just practical." "Practical," she repeated, her smile widening. "You keep using that word." "I do not think it means what you think it means." He laughed, and the sound warmed her from the inside out. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped being afraid of him, stopped worrying that he would grow tired of her limitations. He had proven over and over that he meant what he said. He did not see her blindness as a burden. More than that, she had begun to notice little things. The way he always made sure she had the most comfortable chair. The way he brought her wildflowers from the prairie and described their colors in detail. The way his hand lingered on hers when he passed her something. The way his voice softened when he said her name. She was falling in love with him. She knew it, and the knowledge was both thrilling and terrifying. What if he did not feel the same? What if he truly saw their marriage as nothing more than a practical arrangement? One evening in late July, they were sitting on the porch after supper when Bennett suddenly spoke. "Elena, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" The question surprised her. "Yes, why do you ask?" "I just want to make sure. I know this is not the life you imagined for yourself." "Bennett, I had no life waiting for me in Boston. Here I have a home. I have work that matters. I have people who treat me with respect." She paused, gathering her courage. "I have you." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then she felt him move closer on the porch swing they were sharing. His hand found hers, warm and calloused and strong. "Elena," he said quietly, "this started as a practical arrangement, but it has become something more for me. I find myself looking forward to coming in at the end of the day because I know you will be here. I find myself wanting to tell you about everything I see so you can experience it through me. I find myself thinking about you when I should be thinking about cattle." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I am falling in love with you. I know that might not be what you signed up for, and if you want to keep things as they are, I will respect that. But I needed you to know." Joy flooded through her, so intense it almost hurt. "Bennett Blake, I have been in love with you for weeks. I was just afraid to say anything." She heard his breath catch. Then his hand cupped her face, tilting it up, and his lips found hers in the darkness. The kiss was tentative at first, questioning, but when she leaned into it, his arm came around her waist and pulled her closer. She had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this combination of tenderness and hunger, of careful restraint and barely leashed desire. His hand tangled in her hair and she gripped the front of his shirt, anchoring herself to him as the world spun around her. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly even though we are already married." She laughed breathlessly. "I think we are doing this backward. Probably. But I do not care. Elena, I want this to be a real marriage. Not just on paper, but in every way. I want you to be my wife in truth if you will have me." "I will have you," she whispered. "I want that too." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt herself melting into him. When his hands started to wander, he seemed to catch himself and pulled back with obvious effort. "We should go inside," he said, his voice rough. "Before I forget how to be a gentleman. She smiled against his lips. Maybe I do not want you to be a gentleman. Elena. Her name was half warning, half plea. Are you sure? I am sure. He stood, pulling her up with him, and led her inside and up the stairs. In the hallway, he paused outside her door. Your room or mine? He asked. Yours, she said. She wanted to be in his space, surrounded by his scent in the bed where he slept. He opened the door and led her inside. She heard him light a lamp, though it made little difference to her darkening vision. But she could feel his presence, large and solid and reassuringly real. His hands found her face again, tracing the lines of her features with gentle reverence. I wish you could see your own face, he said softly. You are so beautiful. Describe it to me, she whispered. Describe what you see. Your eyes are the color of summer sky, even though they do not see clearly anymore. Your hair is like honey in sunlight. Your mouth is soft and full, and it drives me to distraction every time I look at it. Your skin is smooth and fair, with a light dusting of freckles across your nose. You are small and strong and perfect. She reached up and traced his face in return, learning him by touch since her eyes could no longer serve. Strong jaw, slightly rough with evening stubble, high cheekbones, a nose that had clearly been broken at some point. Firm lips that curved under her exploring fingers, hair that was thick and slightly too long. Now tell me what I feel like, he said. You feel like strength, she said. Like safety, like home. His arms came around her and he held her close for a long moment. Then slowly, carefully, with infinite patience, he began to unlace her dress. She helped him, her own fingers working at the buttons of his shirt. They undressed each other in stages, pausing between each removed garment to kiss and touch and explore. When they finally came together in his bed, it was with tenderness and care. He was gentle with her, constantly asking if she was all right, moving slowly to give her time to adjust. The intimacy of it overwhelmed her. Not just the physical sensations, though those were intense, but the emotional vulnerability of trusting someone so completely. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. I love you, he said into the darkness. I love you too. She fell asleep in his arms, and for the first time since her diagnosis, she felt completely at peace. The next morning, Elena woke in Bennett's bed with sunlight streaming through the window she could barely perceive. His arm was still around her, heavy and warm, and she could hear his deep, steady breathing that indicated he was still asleep. She lay still, not wanting to wake him, savoring this moment. How had she gotten so lucky? She had left Boston expecting nothing, hoping at best for tolerance and basic kindness. Instead, she had found love. Bennett stirred beside her and his arm tightened around her waist. Morning, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning. He kissed the top of her head. How do you feel? Happy, she said simply. Very, very happy. Good. She could hear the smile in his voice. I should get up. The cattle do not care that I want to stay in bed with my wife all day. Your wife, she repeated, testing the words. They felt different now, weighted with new meaning. My wife, he confirmed and kissed her properly. Come on, I will help you get dressed and then we can face the day together. They established a new routine after that. Elena moved into Bennett's room and they fell asleep and woke in each other's arms. The ranch hands noticed the change, of course, but if they had thoughts about it, they kept them to themselves. Rusty did mention once that Bennett seemed considerably more cheerful these days, which made Bennett laugh and Elena blush. By early August, Elena's vision had deteriorated to the point where she could only distinguish light from dark. Complete blindness was close. She woke one morning and realized she could not see even vague shapes anymore, only a general sense of brightness or shadow. It is gone, she said to Bennett, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. "My sight is gone." He pulled her close, and she felt his lips press against her hair. "Then I will be your eyes," he said. "Like I promised, you can see through me." She clung to him, allowing herself a moment of grief for what she had lost, but then she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. Crying would not bring her vision back. She had known this was coming. She would adapt, and she did. With Bennett's patient help, she learned to navigate the house and ranch entirely by touch and memory. He carved notches in certain door frames so she could tell which room she was entering. He organized the kitchen so everything had a specific place she could find easily. He bought her a cane from a traveling merchant and taught her how to use it to feel her way along unfamiliar paths. The hardest part was not the physical limitations, but the loss of independence. She hated having to ask for help with tasks she had once done without thought. She hated not being able to read. She hated the vulnerability of moving through a world she could not see, but Bennett never made her feel helpless. He helped when she needed it and stepped back when she did not. He read to her every evening. He described the world in such vivid detail that she could almost see it again through his words. One afternoon in late August, Elena was working in the garden when she heard a horse approaching. She straightened, turning toward the sound, her hand instinctively tightening on her cane. "Mrs. Blake." The voice was female, older, unfamiliar. "Yes. I am Dorothy Miller from town. I own the general store. I hope you do not mind me riding out unannounced." "Not at all," Elena said, though her heart was racing with uncertainty. "Please come sit on the porch. Would you like some water? I am afraid I do not have anything fancier to offer at the moment. Water would be lovely, dear." Elena carefully made her way to the house, found the dipper and bucket of fresh water sitting in their usual spot on the porch, and poured a cup. She handed it in the direction of Dorothy's voice, relieved when the woman took it without comment. "Thank you, dear." Dorothy drank, then said, "I will get right to the point. I came to ask if you might be interested in doing some sewing work. I have heard from several sources that you are quite skilled with a needle." Elena blinked in surprise. "I am sorry, Mrs. Miller, but I do not see how I could be of help." "I am blind." "Yes, I know, dear, but my late sister was blind and she was the finest seamstress I ever knew. She said that sewing was about feel, not sight. I thought perhaps you might feel the same." Something in Elena's chest loosened. "What kind of sewing?" "Mending, mostly." "Perhaps some simple alterations. I have customers who need work done, but I am terrible with a needle myself. I thought if you were interested, I could bring work out to you once a week and collect it when I bring new pieces. I would pay you fair wages." Elena's mind raced. Money of her own. Work that did not depend on her sight, a way to contribute beyond cooking and cleaning. "I would very much like to try," she said carefully, "though I cannot promise my work will be good enough." "I trust it will be," Dorothy said warmly. "I will bring some simple pieces next week, and we can see how it goes." After Dorothy left, Elena sat on the porch, her heart singing. When Bennett came in that evening, she could barely contain her excitement as she told him about the visit. "That is wonderful," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I am proud of you. You do not mind. You do not think it is improper for me to take wages." "Mind, Elena? Why would I mind you using your skills? This ranch is our partnership. Anything you do to make it better, whether that is cooking or mending or anything else, is something I support." She hugged him tighter, overwhelmed by gratitude for this man who had given her so much more than a home. He had given her respect, love, and the freedom to be herself despite her limitations. The sewing work proved to be exactly what Elena needed. Dorothy brought simple projects at first, but as Elena's work proved to be excellent, the projects grew more complex. Elena discovered that she could indeed sew by feel, her fingers learning to identify stitches and measure seams without need for sight. Autumn came to Wyoming, bringing cooler temperatures and the work of preparing for winter. Bennett and the men spent long days moving the herd to winter pastures and preparing the ranch for the harsh weather ahead. Elena canned vegetables from her garden, working with Touch and Bennett's patient guidance to ensure everything was sealed properly. One October evening, as they sat together by the fire, Elena suddenly said, "Bennett, I am late." "Late for what?" "No, I mean my monthly courses. I am late." There was a moment of profound silence. Then, "How late?" "2 weeks. Maybe 3. I have lost track of the days a bit." She heard him move, felt him kneel in front of her chair. His hands found hers. "Are you saying you might be with child?" "I think I might be. I have been feeling strange, tired and queasy in the mornings." "Elena." His voice was thick with emotion. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" "Happy," he laughed, slightly wild. "I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. Are you happy?" She searched her own feelings and found that she was. "Yes, I am happy and terrified. How will I care for a baby when I cannot see?" "The same way you do everything else. By feeling your way, by asking for help when you need it, and by being the strongest person I know." He pulled her hands to his lips and kissed them. "We will figure it out together." There was that phrase again, together. The word that had become the foundation of their entire marriage. Bennett took her to the doctor in town the next week, and the doctor confirmed what they suspected. Elena was indeed pregnant, about 2 months along if he had to guess. The baby would come in early spring. The news spread quickly through the ranch and the town. Dorothy arrived with gifts of baby blankets and tiny clothes. Miguel's wife, whom Elena had met several times, came to share advice about pregnancy and childbirth. Even Rusty seemed touched by the news, though he tried to hide it behind his usual gruff exterior. As winter settled over Wyoming, Elena found herself increasingly grateful for the solid walls of the ranch house and the warmth of Bennett's presence. Her body changed, her stomach growing round with their child, and Bennett treated her pregnancy with tender reverence. He read to their baby each night, his hand resting on her belly, his voice painting pictures of the ranch their child would grow up on. The winter was hard but not unbearable. Snow piled high around the ranch, and the men spent much of their time making sure the cattle had food and water. Elena focused on her sewing work and preparing the house for a baby. Bennett had one of the spare bedrooms converted into a nursery, and Elena carefully organized it so she would be able to find everything by touch. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, melting the snow in patches and bringing new life to the prairie. Elena's time was drawing near. She was huge and uncomfortable and utterly exhausted, but also filled with anticipation. One night in late March, her pain started. Bennett, trying to hide his panic, rode for the doctor and for Miguel's wife, Rosa, who had agreed to help with the birth. By the time they arrived, Elena's pains were coming fast and hard. The labor was long and difficult. Elena clung to Bennett's hand, grateful he refused to leave despite Rosa's suggestion that he might prefer to wait downstairs. She needed him there, needed his voice in her ear, telling her she was strong, telling her she could do this. Finally, after what felt like forever, their child entered the world with a loud, angry cry. "A boy," Rosa announced, laughing. "A strong, healthy boy." Bennett was crying. Elena could hear it in his voice as he described their son to her. "He is perfect. He has dark hair and your nose and the strongest grip I have ever felt. Elena, we have a son." They named him Thomas Bennett Blake after Bennett's father, Tommy for short. Elena held him close, learning his face with her hands since her eyes could not see him. He was warm and solid and utterly perfect, and she fell in love with him instantly. Caring for an infant while blind proved challenging but not impossible. Elena learned to recognize Tommy's different cries, to change his nappies by feel, to nurse him with practiced ease. Bennett helped when he could, but the ranch work could not be neglected. Rosa visited often in those early weeks, offering guidance and reassurance. Elena discovered that in some ways being blind made her a better mother. She could not be distracted by other sights. Her entire focus was on Tommy, on the sounds he made, the way he felt in her arms, the smell of his skin. She knew him in a way that went beyond seeing. As Tommy grew, so did Elena's confidence. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh. Bennett was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son. Elena would listen to them together, Bennett's deep voice describing the world to Tommy the same way he described it to her. One evening when Tommy was about 6 months old, Elena sat on the porch with Bennett, their son asleep in her arms. "I have been thinking," Bennett said, "about building a bigger house, something with more rooms for when Tommy gets older, maybe for more children if we are blessed." "More children," Elena smiled. "One is not enough for you. I love being a father, and I love seeing you as a mother. If you want more children, I would be happy." "Then yes," she said softly. "I would like more children, a big family." "A big family," he repeated, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "On a ranch in Wyoming, with a blind mother who can do anything she sets her mind to." "And a father who is her eyes," Elena added. "Always," Bennett promised. "I will always be your eyes." The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Bennett did build a bigger house, enlisting the help of neighbors for a barn raising that turned into a house raising. The new house had 5 bedrooms and a large kitchen with windows facing east so Elena could feel the morning sun. Tommy was joined by a sister, Grace. 2 years later, then another boy, Daniel. 2 years after that. Elena's world became filled with the sounds of children playing, the constant needs of a growing family, and the steady presence of Bennett beside her. Her blindness became simply part of who she was, not a limitation but a different way of experiencing the world. She taught her children that disability did not mean inability. She ran her household with competence and managed the family finances with Bennett's help. Her sewing business grew until she had more work than she could handle, and she taught Grace the trade as her daughter grew older. The ranch prospered. Bennett's hard work and fair dealing earned him respect throughout the territory. Wyoming became a state in 1890, and Bennett celebrated by taking the whole family to the 4th of July festivities in Kelton, where Elena sold more of her sewing than ever before. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Bennett took Elena riding. She had not been on a horse in years, too nervous about navigating the world at such heights without sight. But he insisted, settling her in front of him on his gentlest mare, his arms around her waist, his voice in her ear. "I want to show you something," he said. They rode for what felt like an hour, climbing steadily. Elena could feel the air growing thinner, cooler. Finally, they stopped. "We are at the high point of the ranch," Bennett said. "The view from here stretches for miles. The house is down there, looking small but sturdy. I can see the herd grazing in the east pasture. The mountains are behind us, still capped with snow. The sky is so blue it almost hurts to look at." "It sounds beautiful," Elena said softly. "It is, but not as beautiful as what I see when I look at you." His arms tightened around her. 20 years ago, you stepped off a train, barely able to see, and you trusted me with your life. You gave me everything. Your trust, your love, your faith. You gave me children and a home and a reason to be better than I was. I want you to know that every single day of these 20 years has been a gift. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I am the one who was given a gift. You looked at my blindness and saw me, not my disability but me. You gave me respect and independence and love. You gave me a family and a home. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Bennett Blake. He kissed her there on the mountaintop, and Elena felt the rightness of it all settle deep in her bones. This life, this man, this family they had built together. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. They had 3 more children over the years, bringing their total to 6. The house that had seemed so large when Bennett built it gradually filled with life and noise and love. Elena's hair went gray, though she did not know it until Grace mentioned it one day. Bennett's hands grew more calloused, his back a bit stiffer, but his devotion never wavered. On summer evenings, when the work was done and the children were finally in bed, they would sit on the porch together as they had done from the very beginning. Bennett would describe the sunset in loving detail, painting the colors across Elena's darkness. She would lean against his shoulder, listening to his voice, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. "Tell me what you see," she would say, the question that had become their ritual, and he would tell her. About the orange and pink streaking across the sky. About the way the light caught the mountains. About the cattle settling down for the night. About the future spreading before them, full of possibility. "Your turn," he would say. "Tell me what you feel." "I feel loved," she would answer. "I feel home. I feel like the luckiest woman in Wyoming." "Montana," he would correct with a laugh. They had moved just across the state line to expand the ranch 5 years prior. "The luckiest woman in Montana then." "That makes me the luckiest man," he would say, and kiss her until they both forgot about the sunset entirely. Their children grew and married and had children of their own. Tommy took over running the ranch, with Daniel as his partner. Grace married a doctor from Kelton and moved back to town, where she opened a dress shop featuring her mother's designs. The younger 3 scattered to various parts of the West, but all returned home regularly, bringing grandchildren who clamored for stories from Grandma and Grandpa. Elena taught her grandchildren the same lessons she had taught her children. That limitations were only as binding as you allowed them to be, that love was the strongest force in the world, and that family was everything. Bennett taught them about cattle and horses and the hard work of ranching. But more importantly, he taught them by example how to love someone completely, how to be a partner in the truest sense, how to see the person beyond any surface limitations. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Elena, now 73 and still as sharp as ever despite her blindness, sat in the place of honor with Bennett beside her. Their 6 children, 19 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren filled the house and spilled out onto the lawn. Tommy stood to give a toast. 50 years ago, my father took a chance on a woman he had never met. My mother took a chance on a life she had never seen. They built something remarkable together. Not just this ranch, not just this family, but a partnership that has inspired every one of us. They taught us that love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone who is perfect for you and then choosing them every single day. To Mom and Dad, may we all be so lucky in love. The family cheered and drank, and Elena felt Bennett's hand find hers under the table. "What do you think?" he murmured. "Was it worth it, marrying a stranger and moving to Wyoming?" "Montana," she corrected with a smile. "Montana," he agreed. "It was worth everything," she said. "Every moment of fear, every challenge, every difficulty. It was all worth it to have this life with you. I love you, Elena Blake, today and always. I love you too, Bennett Blake, today and always." As the party continued around them, Elena leaned her head on Bennett's shoulder and listened to the sound of her family, the children laughing, the grandchildren playing, the great-grandchildren crying and cooing. It was the sound of a life well lived, of love multiplied across generations. She had stepped off a train blind and terrified 50 years ago. Bennett had promised that even though her eyes could not see, they would see his heart clearly. He had kept that promise every day since. His heart had been faithful, devoted, constant. His heart had been her home, and she had been right to trust it. The sun set over Montana, painting colors Elena could not see but could feel in the warmth on her skin. Bennett's arm came around her shoulders, solid and sure as it had been for 50 years. Their family surrounded them, the legacy of their love made flesh. "Tell me what you see," Elena said softly, the question she had asked countless times over 5 decades. Bennett's voice was warm in her ear. "I see everything we built together. I see our children and their children and their children. I see a life of love and hard work and faith. I see the most beautiful woman I have ever known who gets more beautiful with every passing year. I see my heart, Elena. That is what I see. My whole heart, and it belongs to you." Elena smiled and squeezed his hand. "Then I see clearly," she said. "I see perfectly. Because your heart is all I ever needed to see." They sat together as the stars came out. Two people who had taken a chance on each other when they were young and had spent a lifetime proving that love could overcome any obstacle. The ranch stretched around them, prosperous and peaceful. The family they had created filled the air with joy. And their love, which had started with a letter and a leap of faith, continued strong and true. It was a good life, a beautiful life. A life that proved beyond doubt that the truest sight comes not from the eyes but from the heart.